Thank you. I'll just start by saying thank you for coming. Please feel free to stop me at any time if I'm not being clear or you need some extra explanation, okay? Feel free to ask your questions or make comments in Korean, and somebody will translate for me. Thank you. Okay, and again, if you were here yesterday, you were given some work to do, and I'm going to do the same thing this morning. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to define digital literacy for me. I don't want you looking up some official definition. I want you to tell me from your point of view, what is digital literacy? And I will wait until someone responds.
I guess I say something. If I'm not a major here, so I'm taking a philosophy major in 강의에서는.
Okay.
So I think digital literacy is connected with the literacy skill according to digital device, like computer, like this kind of thing, iPad. That's more simple definition because I don't have like deep knowledge of it.
That's fine. No, that's just what I'm looking for. I'm looking for your understanding. So you connect it with devices.
Yes.
So it's really technological skills.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other definitions?
I think connecting to digital devices plus can use digital devices to get some information, resource. I think.
Okay, so it's also about accessing information. Okay, so the technical skills plus accessing information. Thank you. Anybody else?
Only technical skill or access is have to contain understanding and interpret and evaluation.
Okay, so we've got technical skills, we've got accessing information, we've got evaluating and interpreting information. So our definition is getting bigger as we go along. Okay, this is excellent. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Now I'm going to spend some time talking about other people's definitions of information literacy. And I think what you'll see is that there is not perfect agreement about what it is. Okay, and there are lots of ways of thinking about it. And I think that's an important starting point, especially if you're thinking of doing something with digital literacy in your research. It's important to understand that this is a term that is not necessarily agreed upon or uncontested. Okay. So I want to ask you these questions. Does the definition that you use in your head, in your daily activities, depend on the demographic that you're thinking about? Does it depend on the people that you're thinking about? We'll start with that question. Does it matter if you're talking about digital literacy for 3-year-olds or 95-year-olds? Does that matter? Does anything change?
I think it depends on person.
Can you explain more?
Actually, there are various people, and the people live are various reasons. Rural and city, we can access and technical environment is very different.
Okay.
That's why it depends on the problem.
Okay, so there's something about the affordances of the environment, of the immediate context, okay, right, right? So going back to the demographic question, is digital literacy different for 3-year-olds than for 95-year-olds?
Actually, the definition can be same, but the specific activity or the theories can be changed.
Okay. So how would you think about evaluating information for a 3-year-old?
They will find information that they love, and if they are satisfied, it can be,
It's okay?
yeah.
Okay,
For 3 years old, yes.
okay. What about for a 95-year-old? Think about your grandmother or your great-grandmother. How might digital literacy work for that person? What might be most important for that person?
I feel like being comfortable with the handling the devices because they're not, used to it.
Okay.
They're different than just like us or younger generation. It's going to be first step
Mhm.
to introducing how they use devices.
Right. So it's again focused on devices. Any other aspects that might be different for a 95-year-old? Think about a 95-year-old today and the period in which that person grew and became 95 and what has changed in the environment over that time. So what might be really important for that person to know or to understand?
They have to get used to a lot of technique or other environment changes. So maybe electronic things or other web or those things can be challenging for them, I guess. So for 95 years old, not only the technique or the using digital material, but they also need to get used to it. And of course, because of the physical changes,
Yes.
they need more convenient UI or UX. I think we have to consider that for 95 years old.
Right, right. I would say it's also possible that a 95-year-old does not necessarily understand the context of information generally. How information gets produced, why it's produced, who benefits from the production of certain kinds of information, and what the implications of that are, okay? So there's a lot that we understand about the information environment because we've grown up in it, right? But somebody who has not necessarily grown up in it may not have that understanding. So what I'm suggesting here is that you not take for granted what you know just by being in your generation at this time, okay? Other generations have not had that privilege, especially older people who have not or did not work in environments that required interaction with technological tools like this. Because obviously in the workplace, workplaces changed and people got familiar with devices, digital devices, but not everybody of that generation worked in that kind of workplace. Yeah.
I don't know if it would help, but like for example, in the use of social media, in our country, we always joke around that there should be a separate Facebook account for older people because they're one among the demographics who can share easily the fake news
Yes,
because they don't have this ability to fact check,
yes,
unlike the younger ones who are not easily convinced of what can be seen in the social media account.
yes.
So there are some studies who really had proven that they're one of the agents of spreading misinformation and disinformation online.
Absolutely, yeah. Older people are 7 times more likely to spread fake news or misinformation online. Yeah. 7 times more likely. Yeah. So would the definition of digital literacy be consistent across cultures, across geographies? You think it's 100% consistent? I disagree with you. I think digital literacy, like so many concepts, is embedded in a context. It's embedded in a socio-cultural context. And its manifestations, its particular priorities and focus will differ from context to context. Okay. So let's spend some time thinking about what other people have said about the definition of digital literacy. Digital literacy clearly sits under the bigger umbrella of literacy. Okay, so reading, writing, and other kinds of literacies, visual literacy, financial literacy, okay? So it's part of a broad idea of literacy in general. And all literacies, all of those things, reading, writing, it's all culturally situated. Meaning making, people's way of making meaning in the world, occurs within a particular set of social conditions. So in this room, you will make meaning in a different way than I will because you are embedded in a different cultural context than I am, right? I'm a visitor to this context. So digital literacy also includes interpretive and creative abilities across a range of text. Not just print, but also all kinds of multimedia. Having the ability to participate in online social communication, like Facebook, for instance, those kinds of practices are part of digital literacy. There are a lot of related terms that get used in this space, and here are some of them. ICT literacy, or information and computing literacy, computer literacy, computational literacy, technological literacy, information literacy, information fluency, transliteracy, meta-literacy, media literacy, and those are just some of them. There are others. All of this leads to conceptual confusion, okay? Because people mean different things by these. So my point here is to warn you that people will use different terms for the same concepts. And you can't necessarily assume what people are necessarily meaning, okay? So it's slippery. It's what we call slippery in terms of definitions. So here's a couple of definitions that emphasize that technological expertise that we heard about first when I asked you about your definitions. So this first one, digital literacy encompasses the skills and abilities necessary for access once technology is available, including a necessary understanding of the language and component hardware and software required to successfully navigate the technology. That's a very technologically oriented definition. And the next one, digital literacy includes the use and production of digital media, information processing and retrieval, participation in social networks for creation and sharing of knowledge, and a wide range of professional computing skills. Again, the focus there is really on the technological skills. But there are other definitions. Digital literacy consists of competency in internet searching, hypertext navigation, knowledge assembly, and content evaluation. Or critical thinking, a traditional conceptual foundation of information literacy, knowledge assembly, that is collecting quality information, and publishing and communicating information is also another definition of digital literacy. And you see these definitions bringing in other kinds of skills and understandings, right? And there's more. Digital literacy is the awareness, attitude, and ability of individuals to appropriately use digital tools and facilities to identify, access, manage, integrate, evaluate, analyze, and synthesize digital resources, construct new knowledge, create media expressions, and communicate with others in the context of specific life situations in order to enable constructive social action and to reflect upon this process. So there's an interesting twist here because it's talking about awareness, it's talking about attitude, and it's talking about reflection, okay? That's bringing in a whole other set of competencies beyond technological kinds of competencies, right? So this is a real expansion of the definition. And you see also the nod towards constructive social action, okay? Towards context. UNESCO likes this definition, and the term that they use is media and information literacy. Core to freedom of expression and information, empowering citizens to understand the functions of media and other information providers to enable critical evaluation of content and to facilitate citizens to make informed decisions as users and producers of information and media content. So what this definition does is focus on empowering citizens with essential knowledge about the functions of media and information systems in democratic societies, okay? So here, there's a real focus on knowledge, on understanding. Again, this is a pretty deep definition. And what this definition is, media and information literacy is intended to do is to contribute to all of these goals: sustainable human development, participatory civic societies, sustainable world peace, freedom, democracy, good governance, and the fostering of intercultural knowledge and understanding. I think this is a very heavy burden to put on the concept of digital literacy. Very heavy burden. My goodness, world peace depends on digital literacy. I hope not, because I think we're in big trouble if that's the case. I think that good digital literacy can contribute to some of these things, but these outcomes are not dependent on digital literacy, I don't think. I think that's an important point to make when you think about just how expansive to get with this definition. Here's some more. Digital and media literacy is another term you can see, including the full range of cognitive, emotional, and social competencies that includes the use of text, tools, and technologies, the skills of critical thinking and analysis, the practice of message composition and creativity, the ability to engage in reflection and ethical thinking, as well as active participation through teamwork and collaboration. Wow. Okay, we've got emotional competencies there. That's new. This is the first definition to actually refer to ethics. Okay, ethical thinking in this context. Hobbes writes, digital media literacy empowers people to critically analyze the agendas inherent in information sources and to advocate for minority or marginalized points of view. That's an overtly political aim for this concept. That's new too. It includes the ability to access and share information using media and technology, critically analyze and evaluate, the ability to create information in sophisticated ways, to reflect on information and communication from an ethical perspective, and the ability to work individually or with others to share information in all contexts. Again, that is a huge expansion of this concept, right? Working together with other people. Is that really part of digital literacy? I'm not so sure that I would include that. The American Library Association has its own definition. This is a fairly influential professional group in the United States, at least in the information world, and this is the way they define it. The ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information, requiring both cognitive and technical skills. So nothing there about emotion, not really anything there about ethics. It expands the concept to include information stewardship, communication with others, civic participation, and democratic engagement. So this definition is really bringing in the idea of supporting democracy, digital literacy, and civic participation. Do you understand what civic participation is? It's engaging actively in democracy, okay? By voting and, participating in political life. For the American Library Association, digital literacy is conceived in global terms, and its importance is underlined by tying it to the potential role in helping the U.S. compete in global economic, educational, and intellectual contexts. So this, I think, is a uniquely American perspective. And I'm speaking here as a Canadian, so I can say this. But tying this definition to the place of the nation in the world, right, is very interesting link to me. Very interesting, and I think that's worth some research right there, taking that apart a little bit, what that means and what the implications of that might be. This is a very pragmatic definition that I use, okay? This is the one that I use. Digital literacy is the set of skills, knowledge, and attitudes required to access and use digital information effectively, efficiently, and ethically. It includes knowing how to evaluate digital information and how to use it in decision-making. So the key words there: effective, efficient, and ethical. And I think those are equally important concepts. Feel free to stop at any time if you need to check me. So what about the relationship between information literacy and digital literacy? Yeager says information literacy is a subset of digital literacy. And this one says digital literacy is a subset of information literacy. Because I see digital literacy as part of information literacy. Because information literacy can include literacy with information that's not digital. And there's plenty of non-digital information that is still useful to us, okay? So, other people see it differently, but I see it as information literacy as the larger umbrella and digital literacy as the subset. However, because I work in the real world, I tend to use the term digital literacy because information literacy is not well understood outside of the profession of librarianship. The rest of the world is not using the term information literacy. The rest of the world is using digital literacy or something like that. So, putting digital literacy in context, It is a literacy, it's a practice. It is central, I think, to how we navigate the world in the 21st century, at least in the global north, for most of us. Essential to how we make meaning in our lives, but we do have to consider the context, the cultural, the social context, the information landscape, and the affordances and the barriers that offers. You understand what I mean by using the term affordances? Simply what an environment allows us to do. So let's turn now to thinking about digital literacy training, because thinking about the definition of digital literacy is important, I think, especially for people in the information world. We need to be thinking deeply about these things. But I think the practical implications are really about developing digital literacy skills among the general population. So who does this work? Schools, to greater and lesser degrees. I think Korea does a better job of this than we do in North America. The best job is done by the Finns. Take a look at the Finnish education system. They do an outstanding job of teaching this in the school system, right from when children are very small. The higher education sector also teaches digital literacy in academic libraries, universities, colleges, that kind of thing. Other contexts also, nonprofits will teach digital literacy skills, community organizations, for instance, public libraries. And the focus in all of these contexts is typically on skills, and also on attitudes or knowledge about the information environment, and sometimes on ethical issues. Okay? So ethical use of technology, things like that. The research that I've done shows that you can divide the kind of digital literacy training that occurs into different levels. So at the very basic level, and this in fact is where most digital literacy training focuses, is introducing people to everyday computing tasks, using email, browsing the web. And if you think about that 95-year-old grandmother, very likely that's going to be the starting point, right? Then there's an intermediate level where people introduce common applications like word processing. But at the higher levels, you find training focusing on things like confident use of digital tools and facilities to identify, access, manage, integrate, evaluate, analyze, and synthesize digital resources, helping people to construct new knowledge from their use of these tools, to create media of various kinds, to use the internet for transactions like banking, ordering food, and developing awareness of security issues. Security issues is another area where that 95-year-old grandmother is likely to need a lot of help, okay? Because those 95-year-old grandmothers can be very much at risk of being taken advantage of because they don't necessarily understand the security issues around those tools. The research that I've done shows that there are a number of conditions that contribute to the success of digital literacy training. One of these is high-level commitment to the goals of this training. And when I say high level, I mean managers, administrators, people in charge need to see this as important. And surprisingly, some don't. Okay? There are many academic libraries where this kind of work is not seen as very important. I find it very unfortunate. This kind of training also requires other kinds of support. So financial support, staffing support, materials, space. There also needs to be a commitment to quality. So a focus on things like instructional design, pedagogy, assessment and evaluation. For example, understanding that active learning is more effective than passive learning. That's a fundamental principle, pedagogical principle that leads to successful outcomes in training. When training is scheduled at convenient times, or when it's aligned to curriculum or assignments in courses, that also contributes to its success. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from academic librarians who say, we offer these workshops and nobody comes. I can tell you probably why they're not coming, if you're interested in hearing, okay? Because they're not being scheduled at convenient times. They're not being marketed very well. Libraries are notoriously poor at marketing their services. When the training is effectively publicized, it makes a big difference to its success. When it's delivered by well-prepared instructors who have positive relationships with learners, outcomes are improved. And when there are stakes involved, when the training's required, or when the learning involved is assessed, that also increases the chances of success in this kind of training. So, how do we think about success in terms of digital literacy training? Well, we can think of it in terms of outputs. This is a very traditional way of measuring success. And when you're thinking about outputs, you're thinking about counting. How many? How much? So you might be counting the number of course registrants. How many people signed up to take this course? Or the number of courses or workshops that got offered. How useful do you think this data is? Not necessarily very useful. Okay. Very commonly gathered, but not necessarily very useful. It's much easier to track this kind of data than outcomes, but it's less informative and less convincing than focusing on outcomes. So, when you're thinking about outcomes, you're asking questions like these. What difference did the training make? What were the benefits? And the research that I've done shows that there are three main categories of benefits if you ask these kinds of questions. There are psychological benefits. So people report feeling increased confidence, decreased anxiety about using digital tools. They'll talk about having a better understanding of the resources available to them. There are also behavioral outcomes. Learners come to appreciate and use librarian expertise. And this is an ongoing problem because people don't necessarily see librarians as having this expertise. Crazy, but true. Students will start assignments earlier once they've had digital literacy training, which is a good thing. Students ask more sophisticated questions. They have improved perceptions of librarians. And there are also benefit outcomes, like time savings. Students report that it takes less time to accomplish their academic goals once they've had some digital literacy training. Their effort gets reduced and they get better grades. That's a very strong argument in favor of digital literacy training. Could we not take those kinds of outcomes and put them on billboards all over campus and say, look, save your time, get better grades. This makes a difference.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, of course.
You said there are many contributions you guys have to consider to measure the digital literacy.
Yeah.
And then the outcome should become like this, where psychological behavior benefits. And then depend on how much contribution you satisfy,
Yeah.
and the outcome will be very different, right? then how can you see the connection between lots of contribution and then outcome? It's
It's-
highly connected and like it's kind of objective result of your research. How can we kind of guarantee that?
There are no guarantees.
So it's just like
Forget objectivity, okay?
So- okay.
Objectivity does not exist, okay? Literally, you're coming from philosophy, you should know this.
yes,
There is no such thing
yes.
as objectivity, right? What this list is a list of the outcomes that people tell us, okay? People say, this is the difference that it made. That's what matters. Okay? If they say that this is what changed for them, that's what matters. Nothing else matters.
It's kind of interesting that because I studied sociology in my college years, and then like my professor usually emphasized the objective data about the research.
Right.
And then it's very interesting to see the different perspective of the informational science and this kind of
Yeah,
diverse
yeah.
field.
Oh, there's plenty of folks in information science who will argue in favor of objectivity, but nothing is objective. Okay, the researcher who chooses to look at a particular area, who chooses a particular method, none of that is objective, right? It's all subjective in one way or another. It all reflects their training, their interests, their personalities, the people that they're trying to impress, right? It's not objective. I'm waiting for Professor O in the back to challenge me on this. I'm trying to poke and see if I can get a response. Okay. So here are some more examples of outcomes that people talk about when they've done some digital literacy training. Positive health outcomes. People are able to access high quality health information online once they have better understanding. They're better able to access government services. In most advanced democracies, most government services are delivered online, right? And if you don't have access to that, it can be very challenging, right? This is again an area for that 95-year-old grandmother that might make her life challenging. Greater participative governance. People feel empowered to engage more in civics. Improvements in workforce development, so improved job performance and employment possibilities. Helping people to keep in touch with loved ones. Newcomers or immigrants able to maintain ties with their home country. And bridging of the digital divide generally. You know, the most important use of computers in public libraries is for newcomers to keep in touch. Look at newspapers from home, keep in touch with family from home, because most of those people don't have a device of their own that they can use. This list of outcomes is pretty impressive. When you think about the change, the difference that it will make in somebody's life. So how can you measure these outcomes?
Heidi,
Yes.
can you go back to the slide? I think that's your first slide. This is something we as information professionals to ponder on
Yes.
and to think about
Yes.
our responsibility
Yes.
for the future, and considering our society and how important is really accomplishing digital literacy, particularly in many respects in terms of the better democratic society.
Yes.
And it's so important for us to recognize this is a really important role we must play as information professionals. So we should think very seriously about how to, when it is an opportunity to promote ourselves, so we really can do this, and really requiring resources and also our young scholars to be well trained and to really work with many librarians, and also so important to be able to communicate effectively to all the government officials, and so that because we have a series of political divide, digital divide, mail divide, And we have like a regional divide. Certain regions are staunch, so people are not reading in a balanced way. So those very important part, all this, and how to listen to others, and how we are in a balanced way of getting information and encouraging those things to have a healthy communication. Healthy communication is not happening in USA at this moment, but it's used to be better communication. So your lecture on this one really brings a lot of things for us to think about. And I hope our students recognize the seriousness of these matters.
Thank you. Thank you for making that point. Yeah. Professor O had the advantage of listening to a talk I gave earlier this week on exactly this point about the need for the information professions to really take this seriously and to advocate for its importance with policymakers.
We didn't do a good job, and we are still not doing a good job on this. As not only a public school, but entire our association is doing much better.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, now to look at measurement. If you're looking at outcomes, you are automatically using qualitative approaches, okay, because you're not counting things. Right? You're not counting. So you're doing surveys, you're doing interviews, you're doing focus groups, and all of that takes time, resources, commitment, and expertise. So very, very often, the reason that outcomes are not the focus of evaluation is because of the work involved in doing it. Okay. Has anybody here done a study using interviews, for instance? Yeah? Well, you'll know then that doing an interview study generates hundreds of pages of data.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hundreds of pages of data. A lot of data. It takes a long time to collect, to analyze, right, to disseminate. So it's a barrier in many places to focusing on outcomes. It's much easier to count the number of people who came to the training session. But I say it's not good enough to do that.
From my experience, if you want to do any qualitative study, it's very important to be able to understand between the lines. So you need to really read aloud. So if you don't read aloud, your reading comprehension is very important. So you need to be mindful of, if you want to get involved into qualitative research, you should have a good listening comprehension. You should continue to develop your reading comprehension.
Good point. So success depends on understanding people's information practices, that is, how they use and manipulate information, and the place of digital literacy within that, within those practices. I think it also depends on collaboration with funders, policymakers, libraries and librarians, schools and teachers and parents, all of the people for whom this is a responsibility. I think my perspective is that digital literacy is not a silver bullet. In other words, it's not a perfect solution to everything, okay? But it's a very important goal, and it should remain on our agendas as practitioners and as people engaged in policy development around these things. Any other comments or questions at this point? Feel free to challenge me on anything.
Heidi, do you have any suggestion or idea how we can teach effectively the information literacy for the LISP, like for future librarians maybe?
I think the most important thing, I mean, I think that the actual knowledge comes through the training anyway. I think the missing piece in most contexts is the training to teach well, to do that training well, okay? So one of the courses that I teach in our program for master's students is information literacy instruction. So instructional design, pedagogy, assessment, all of these things, right? Because it's not good enough to know your subject. You have to be able to teach that well, right? And teaching is a science as well as an art, okay? Just because you know something doesn't mean you can teach it well. So just by way of explanation, my first degree is an education degree, okay? So I come to this with some, you know, theoretical background, some conceptual foundation here, but it makes a very big difference. I have been looking at digital literacy instruction in academic and public libraries for just about 30 years. And in almost all cases, outcomes are not assessed. So librarians don't really know what the outcomes of that work are. They're not particularly well trained to do that work, so they haven't received you know, training in how to teach well. They get hired to do those kinds of roles by managers, by administrators who don't care that they don't have that background, right? Think about it. Would you hire somebody without some kind of expertise to work in an academic library in a different role? I don't think so, right? But somehow we think that we can ask people to teach even if they don't really know what they're doing. We're doing ourselves a very big disservice.
Yeah.
Heidi, I wonder whether something as important as digital literacy, whether like at least I'm not sure this like in a standard curriculum or a list of core competency must be accomplished, that kind of thing, and whether they at least thought about, because that's they are really focused on education. I also wonder.
Right. Well, you know that the programs in North America are accredited not by ALICE, but by the American Library Association. And the standards for accreditation are not intended to be prescriptive, okay? They're intended to be ideas that you might want to include in the curriculum. But everybody takes a look at that list and, you know, make sure that somewhere in the curriculum that exists. So digital literacy instruction is on that list. But in almost all programs, it's an elective. It's not required, right? It's an elective. So for instance, in our program, we have nearly 500 master's students. And I teach that course twice a year, so 35 students, so 70 students in total a year. Most students are not taking that course, okay? Which in some respect is okay, because many of them are not going to be interested in that area. They'll be doing other things, right? They'll go into industry, they'll do whatever. But a small proportion of graduates have that kind of training. But my point is that hiring people to do this kind of work, they should be looking for that kind of training.
Yeah, like, I asked because we are now in the pilot implementation of the service learning. Our university required courses in different colleges to have at least one course which will implement service learning. So I chose information literacy. So what our students are doing, they're going to have at least a portion of, during the semester, we need to go out to the community to teach about digital literacy. And with that, they will be somewhat equipped and measured on the impact of this subject, of this course.
So how are they being prepared to do that?
We are discussing first inside the classroom what they're going to teach in the community. Then after that, they're going to have this focus group discussion and the evaluation. So their output should be from what they had learned and what the community learned from them, imparting their knowledge of digital literacy on the different communities. So yeah.
So is the focus on the content, on the digital literacy content, or are you also training them in appropriate training techniques?
Yeah, we are first preparing them for appropriate training techniques, and that's include the evaluation and measurement. Because we have really designed the curriculum based on Nanyang University in Singapore.
Okay.
So they had given us a template of how we're going to do the evaluation and measurement.
Okay.
So yeah, I left the subject there. So I do hope they're going to implement that next semester.
Yeah, great, great. And there was another, yeah.
So for me personally, I'm interested in developing a course about the digital literacy for the student here. But it's quite challenging because digital literacy nowadays includes multiple aspects, including we are highly interested in data literacy these days, also AI literacy is really interesting topics. But if we include all the things, include like a base using including the classical information literacy, digital literacy, and media literacy. I think it's really like a wide range to cover all the things for undergraduate students. So I'm still thinking how to like identify what should be included for the digital literacy course for the LIS undergraduate students.
Right, right. Well, what I would suggest are the things that like data literacy, AI literacy, all of that are separate courses on their own, okay? So they, have them learn about AI, have them learn about data. That's not really the focus of digital literacy. The digital literacy course should focus on how to teach all of this stuff, right? It's not about the content, it's about the action of teaching.
Oh, that is why your course is like the digital literacy instruction.
Exactly,
Like
exactly. The digital literacy content they get in the rest of the curriculum.
Yeah, okay, that really helps.
And if you're interested, I would be happy to share my syllabus
Yeah,
with you. Yeah,
yeah.
send me an email and remind me, and I'd be happy to share. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether you're willing to share your syllabus.
Of course.
And I think the data literacy should be separate class. AI literacy should be separate class.
Yeah.
Not mingled together.
Yeah.
So it's to me, it's data literacy as a subset of infant literacy is very important. So it must treat it very importantly for our input for students to understand.
Yeah.
But do not mingle with it. Data literacy itself is an excellent another class.
Yeah.
It should be taught a separate class.
Yeah.
And AI literacy was a separate class.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Great. So I found a couple of Korean examples that I want to share with you. So here's a recent study that concluded that in recent years, attention toward digital literacy among South Korean older adults, here's that 95-year-old grandmother again, has grown rapidly. However, the level of digital literacy among older adults in South Korea remains inconclusive, given measurement heterogeneity. You know what that means? It means that people are measuring things in a lot of different ways, so it's very hard to know what's going on generally. Developing and validating more robust measures are warranted to evaluate digital literacy among older adults with diverse functions and circumstances. So the conclusion is more work needs to be done because we don't really know what's going on with the 95-year-old grandmother here in South Korea. Another study, recent one, of again older adults. Digital literacy was consistently positively correlated with life satisfaction in each year that this study was done. Of the three main elements, digital competency had the strongest impact, and digital information, income, and education level also significantly impacted life satisfaction. While digital competency improved steadily over those years, it remained below 50% for Korea's older adult population. Further efforts are required to improve digital competency and subsequent life satisfaction for your 95-year-old grandma. Okay. So more work needs to be done in this area. There's lots of space here for you to do more work. Not only with grandma, but also with other groups. Here's an opinion of one Korean expat who's currently at a university in Belgium, who says, I've worked as a primary school teacher and have had the opportunity to discuss media literacy education with several teachers who echoed a similar sentiment. Students are proficient in using digital tools, but they're not media literate. In the era of social media platforms, online streaming services, and user-generated content, it's crucial for students to develop the ability to navigate and critically engage with media and digital spaces. And what she suggests is what's needed is curriculum integration of this kind of training, so integrate it into the other curriculum in the school setting. Teacher training, okay, because many teachers are not very digital literate themselves. And resources, right, learning resources to help support teachers to do this kind of work.
Heidi, this is interesting. She points out like the curriculum integration because and also the ethical, that's called the embedded ethical teaching, and actually this is occurring in the engineering. Actually, our Yun Song-yi, she's the CEO of, and actually she sponsored Stanford, MIT, and MIT and Harvard. If they are willing to create curriculum, embed the ethics, not separate ethics. So while you are teaching engineering design course, if you really create an ethical dimension of engineering courses, and you are willing to share those design and the curriculums, then so she supported them, and so they are now it's available. So it's like a, kind of embedded ethics, so embedded. So she's that this person is also advocating. I think this whatever media literacy, whatever that had to be kind of integrated into many different subjects.
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
I think
That's
that can be
absolutely the
effective.
most effective way
Yeah,
to do it.
that means that many teachers should know.
Yes, yeah. So, my question for you, before I make you get back to work on something, is what resonates for you here? What, in other words, what makes sense to you from what I've been talking about? What about the roles of various kinds of libraries and other stakeholders? Or the preparation of information professionals for this kind of work, the support for this kind of work, the outcomes, the opportunities, the challenges? Anything in particular that we've talked about over the last hour that really clicked for you? Again, I'll wait here until someone speaks. Did anything make sense?
Students to speak.
If nobody speaks, I'll walk away thinking nobody cared about any of it.
Oh, yeah.
Did it raise any questions for you? Give you any new ideas?
I was interested in measuring outcomes of digital literacy, but it is very, I think it is very challenging because there are many, factors affecting the outcomes of digital literacy. So that's why, even though in LIS many researchers publishes papers about outcomes, but researchers from other fields, other disciplines are not convinced that because of the so many factors. Even though in LIS we argue that libraries and information institutions can strengthen information and digital literacies, and those literacies affect, personal or social outcomes. But still it seems like the perception for outcomes of digital literacy is quite low. So how do you think of this?
I think that the disciplines that are not accepting these outcomes, or not accepting that we're making this connection, are need to be ignored, right? Because there are many disciplines where people talk about these kinds of influences. Sociology, for one, okay? Not everything can be quantified and statistically measured, right? We're not doing, sequential equation modeling here, right? That's not necessary. If you can talk to people about an experience that they've had and let them tell you about how that changed things for them, the difference that it made, that should be good enough.
So you mean based on qualitative
Yes,
findings,
yes,
we can say
yes. I've spent 30 years of my career trying to make this point, that qualitative research is trustworthy. Good qualitative research is trustworthy. It's valid. We don't need statistics to demonstrate that something matters, right? Something made a difference.
To me, what you present here has a huge implication to all other disciplines. This
Yes.
is one of the role the iSchool can, or whatever the LIS department can play to, in a package where we have a very competent teachers and can really all other disciplines, many disciplines, their students, this will be one of the almost exit requirement. Do they have digital literacy or not to be living in this world? This is so important. And this is one of the things I think some schools already. This is one thing as Mike Eisenberg was trying to do at the University of Washington. I think they're quite succeeded, and many students are taking. But my question to you is the really raising good teachers is important.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering whether you have done some like ACES conference or ALICE conference, have some so-called some expert teachers getting together in scopes and pedagogies and challenges and how to measure challenges, content of challenges, and that kind of thing can be excellent. Already have done that, or if they've done that, you will be in excellent panels or workshops or something.
Yeah. Well, ALICE often includes content, pedagogy focused content, but not brought together in the way that you're particularly suggesting it, right? Yeah.
But that I would love to see, this being, kind of promoted and really get recognized how important this is, and have this must be like a ongoing. What I did, I brought together in conference at least what is the kind of best capstone practices or challenges, and also I created what is the best kind of teachings and research. We talked about a lot of interdisciplinary, and what is a really good examples of interdisciplinary teaching and interdisciplinary research. So I really organize those kind of things. But I think that this digital literacy is such an important area, and it really permeates. It's one of the service area we can say really, you need us to train those students in every discipline, and then make sure we have a good teacher who can deliver it and make, one student listen to it and say, wow, that's a great class, and you must take the word of mouth.
Yeah.
It should be like that, and that's important.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So now I'm waiting for you answer how we can do that.
I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you. Okay, now it's your turn to work. Yes.
One other question. So what if I teach digital literacy as a general education course, not major
Yeah.
course for LIS students.
Yeah.
And you should
How can I mean, what kind of contents can I cover? So it is not about how they teach.
Yeah, but yeah, well, at the University of Buffalo, my university, there is what they call Gen Ed, so general education component to all undergraduate degrees. And one of the not required but possible courses that students can take is a digital literacy course. So it covers things like, you know, the information environment, information evaluation, yeah, these kinds of things. So yeah, there is such a course.
Could you please share that syllabus as well?
We don't teach it in our department, it's actually taught by librarians. Right, so I don't have access to the syllabus, but I can certainly connect you with somebody who could get you the syllabus. So send me an email to remind me. Yeah.
What I think is the LIS school should provide the three general courses. One is digital literacy, one is data literacy, one is AI literacy. Three courses, if they may not the three, but I think those are such a good classes. We can do than anyone else. Because this is a literacy class, not something about how to do AI, but what you need to understand, you know, for in the AI world, the kind of basic things all students should understand. And so that is the area we can do. There's three general classes we should offer to all majors. And they should be, dying to come to. Yeah. So if you market around, and that is, but make sure you get benefit of teaching these classes. You need to negotiate, otherwise you do all the work, they don't do anything. I mean, financially, I'm talking financially. So you need to do arrange that first. And so whatever you teach, by the number of students you teach, certain money should come to your department.
Here's our entrepreneur over there.
Heidi, I'm quite, wanted to ask because the media and information literacy in particular, UNESCO had already created a curriculum for teaching this component. I do hope the digital literacy can create somewhat like this, so it will be much more easier for us to
Yeah, to some extent, but the point I made in the beginning about this being culturally situated is important. You cannot, I don't think, create a curriculum that you can plop anywhere and use, with equal success. I think that there's a lot to be said for adapting to the local circumstances, local cultural context.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, now it's time for you to work. So you can do this in small groups, 3-4 people maybe, okay? What I want you to do is design a lesson in digital literacy. It can be, focused on whatever aspect you think is important. Articulate 3 objectives for your lesson. So you want your students to learn 3 things, okay? Only 3. Be specific about who your learners are, who the students are that you're teaching here. Could be your 95-year-old grandmother, could be a 3-year-old, could be anything in between. So think about them and think about their context. Think about what successful outcomes of that training would be, okay? Describe those outcomes. How would you measure that? What do you need to execute your plan? What resources do you need? What challenges might you face? And how would you pitch this to a decision maker to get support for it, okay? So I'm gonna give you half an hour for this because this is a lot of work, okay? So you're gonna have to focus. So you're designing a lesson with 3 objectives, and you have to think about all of these things, okay? And then I'm gonna ask you to tell the rest of us what you did. So be sharp.